everyone. Welcome back to the Screen Society podcast, a podcast that covers all things TV, movies, and anything in between. I'm your host, Logan, and today we are launching into a brand new show here on this podcast. It is season 3 of Shrinking, and it aired just this last week, so I cannot wait to talk about it. It is streaming now on Apple TV+. It is a weekly release, so it is one of those shows that you're going to have to wait for that next episode, but the episodes typically range right around that hour mark. So you're getting a lot of great content, a lot of good storytelling. And it's one of my favorite shows because it blends so many different things that I really look for in a show, with great characters, great writing and humor. And it also has some really deep moments, especially as the seasons have gone on, as more and more trauma is hitting some of our characters. And it really launches into that in season 3, episode 1. So we're here today to talk about that. I hope you guys are doing well out there. If you're listening to this, hope you're staying warm. I know it's cold here, which is wild. It's cold here in Florida. It was 24 degrees, or it feels like 24 degrees, which is abnormal temperatures for the state of Florida. And I know across the country, people are getting absolutely smashed in with some snow. So hopefully everybody out there has some power, or if you're listening to this to just get by that snowstorm, I really appreciate the listen so far. It's been a pretty good start to this podcast, and I think I've got a good footing of what I'm going to be discussing. I like these weekly releases because it gives me time to collect my thoughts, rewatch the episodes, do some notes, and get into depth with some of the reactions and reviews. I typically record all of my episodes on Sunday, Monday, or Tuesday, so we're trying to get these out so people have time to listen to them before that next episode drops, and it's easier to do with that. I might cover some other shows that are dropped so you can binge them. So, for instance, Bridgerton just came out yesterday or 2 days ago on Friday, I think it was, and they dropped them in batches. So it's the first 4 episodes, I think, of that show. I think we might just do a summary of those 4 episodes for Bridgerton, just because I know a lot of people are binging right through and watching those 4 hours or so of that show. So we're kind of just going with the flow, and we're trying to pick up on what we can cover on this podcast. I know we are very show heavy right now, but there's so many shows that are dropping in January and February. And then throughout the spring, it's just a top loaded year for shows and movies that we're going to be covering. So we're trying to keep up with all of these shows that we really enjoy. And it just so happens that so many of these are the ones that we have previously watched. My wife and I usually watch all these together. I think that Game of Thrones is the only one that I'm covering. A Night of the Seven Kingdoms is the only one I'm covering that she has not watched. She's never seen a Game of Thrones series. But that being said, we're launching into Shrinking. I know that was a whole lot of roundabout way to get back to this. But like I said, it's airing on Apple TV+, and it came out on January 28th and came out to another really strong start and got a lot of great reviews. IMDb, the episode called My Bad, is currently sitting at an 8.9. Director Randall Keenan Winston, writers Brian Gallivan and Sasha Garin, and then stars Jason Segel, Jessica Williams, Luke Tenney, Harrison Ford, Krista Miller. The cast is back to its, I think, full strength right now. So I don't think we're missing any of the characters that were in last season that were mainstays in the season. I think Kobe Smulders is in the trailer. Michael J. Fox joins the cast this year, and in a really interesting way, and we'll get into that as we get into the episode. I'm going to try to break it down best I can. I typically like to go somewhat scene by scene and talk about that because it helps kind of with the flow of the show. But I realized as these shows are longer and longer, it's harder to keep up with scene by scene. And I think it's better as we just talk through each of the character progressions. So I think that's what we're going to do. We're going to start by talking about a little bit about scene by scene, and then we're going to get into, after that, some of the characters and their arcs and how we're picking up with them in season 3, episode 1. But just getting into it, we start right away with a reminder of where we left off last season. So for those that are just catching up or couldn't quite remember how season 2 ended, we had I think it was the last Thanksgiving, or My Thanksgiving was titled. And that episode left us on somewhat of a little cliffhanger where Jason Segel's character, Jimmy, is confronting a past that is very traumatic. And he went through through the season last season really struggling, coming to terms with the fact that his daughter, Alice, played by Lukita Maxwell, was befriending the character that was the drunk driver that hit Alice's wife, Alice's mom, Jimmy's wife, and killed her, Tia. And that character is Lewis, who is played by Brett Goldstein. And when they did this last year, when they cast Brett Goldstein as the drunk driver that killed Jimmy's wife, I felt it was a brilliant move. And Brett Goldstein is always somebody that's going to be an executive producer slash writer, but he is a really great actor. Same thing happened on Ted Lasso. They asked him to come in, even though he was a head writer on that show. They auditioned multiple people for Roy Kent in that show. If you have not seen that show, he's a very gruff kind of man, very angry and crotchety, and a veteran on that team where he's just around a bunch of the younger players all the time, and he acts like a grumpy guy, and you kind of chip away at a very rough exterior and get a very soft interior. Brett Goldstein. And then you listen to interviews outside, and Brett Goldstein is a very soft spoken, very kind, very smiley guy, and he's just very loving, and people really are drawn to Brett because of just how charismatic he really is. Then you flash forward to this TV show, and he's very obviously very timid because when they introduce him, he is around the people that he's hurt the most, and that is going to be Jimmy and Alice, because they did kill Tia, or he killed Tia in a car accident while drunk driving. And that set up last season's character arc for Alice. Alice was having conversations with him in season 2, approached him, went to coffee shop with him, was really trying to forgive Lewis because she needed to move past all of the heartbreak and trauma that she had been experiencing since her mother had passed. And Alice, by the end of that season, has really gotten through a lot of trauma. She's met with different people and talked to different people, like Sean, who's played by Luke Tenney. And then you also had Harrison Ford character Paul. And Paul is, as she explains it in this episode, kind of like a therapist grandpa. And Alice has had multiple conversations with him about how do I handle trauma. And because they're all therapists, they're able to give her advice based off of what their knowledge and expertise is in. But also, all of these people know Jimmy's wife because they all work with him, and they all were very close when Tia passed. They were the supporting cast that really carried Jimmy through all of this heartbreak, and now have kind of passed that torch to taking care of Alice and getting her through the trauma. Because as a kid, I think it's a lot more difficult. And she's in high school. I think she's a senior in this year, so she'd have probably been a junior last season, and she's really struggling with this trauma that she's faced and not knowing how to get past what she's dealing with. And you never are going to get over a parent that was taken too early, or even a parent that was taken at all. And I think they do such a wonderful job of showing how someone that age would really deal with something like that. And I think for a teenager, I wouldn't say it's easier, but I think it definitely helps that they've got so much going on in their worlds, and so many different things are more important than what you would consider as an adult. So, for instance, her friend groups, who she's friends with, who she is having romantic feelings for, who she is having drama with, like that's a lot more, like where she's going to college, which comes up in this season, playing sports. She's got so much going on in her life that is centered around other things that I think she has the opportunity to kind of break away from the ideas and thoughts that she has about her mother, and that she misses her, and that there's a lot of things going on that really impacted her, but she doesn't have time to sit and kind of just sulk and be upset about those things, because life is going on at warp speed when you're 15, 16 years old. Whereas Jimmy, as an adult, loses a wife, and aside from the fact that he's got a daughter who they're very upfront with in season 1, that he's just kind of lost touch with his daughter because he shut himself off, and she also kind of shut herself off, but she was looking for help from Jimmy to get past that. But because Jimmy was grieving so hard, it was like he was an absent father for a year after his wife had died. So their neighbor, who's played by the lovely Krista Miller, Liz, takes care of Alice throughout season one and before season one even aired. There's this illusion that she had been taking care of her all the way through season one, and Jimmy through season one was trying to cope with the death of his wife, and he's still up to season three coping with the fact that he also needs to move on. Alice needs to move on past this. And we go from season one to season three, where we're starting to see in this episode and throughout season three, it's going to be a lot about those two moving on and moving past the hurdles. And it's kind of like these, I wouldn't say they're excuses, because it's kind of rough to put on somebody who has just lost a loved one, like a mother or a wife. They are dwelling in the past and trying to cope with what has happened, but they're not moving forward. And in life, as much as it hurts to move forward after somebody has died that you love, you still have to do it, because that's just the way life is. And you have to continue living, but honoring them and respecting them, even though they're no longer around, but they would want you to move on, right? I think that's something that is part of the grief process, is understanding that it's okay to move on and you don't have to replace somebody, right? Like, just because Jimmy's wife Tia died in a car accident and was tragically taken way too early, the love of his life, he doesn't have to go and replace her. He can move on and find love with someone else. And it might not be the same love that he had with Tia, obviously, but there's a way to honor that. And there are people in this world that would respect that, right? I think if, for instance, Jimmy has a relationship going forward, I think that that person would understand that he's lost a wife, and that that love might not have been the same as the other. But honestly, that person's not really thinking of Jimmy that, oh, he's just stuck on his wife and he's never going to get past that, so he'll never love me. That's not it. It's that person would probably understand that there was somebody there that it's like a void that'll never be filled. But that being said, you can have the same kind of love, same kind of passion for someone beyond that and move past that. And I think unless you're in that position, I don't think it's very easy to explain. So I'm trying the best to do so. But I know there's people out there that are watching this show that are grieving loss of a loved one, whether it's a husband, wife, spouse, mother, father, whatever it might be. It's okay to move on. You're not replacing them. They would never think you were replacing them. It's just that life has so many different obstacles and challenges, and there's so many things that can make somebody happy. And I don't think they would want you to sit and not be happy because they're no longer around. And that's something that I think these characters, all of them, are having to deal with. Because Liz, you've got somebody like Gaby, who is really good friends with Tia, Jimmy's wife. So you've got all these characters trying to move past different things that they've experienced. And then you've got other characters that have been brought in who are also trying to deal with the past and moving past that. But because they are all so much of a family, a weird little family, I think that it does a really nice job of them all trying to cope with this one person's death, who Tia honestly must have been an incredible person, not just a wife and a mother, but also an incredible friend, because Liz and Gaby are so close to Tia, and they really miss her, and it really shows. So that's enough of that. We're going to get into actually breaking down the season. If you remember, like I said, last season, Jimmy, a little bit of cliffhanger. Lewis, who was played by Brett Goldstein, the drunk driver, is contemplating committing suicide, stepping in front of an oncoming train. Jimmy appears on the platform, and in season two, he appears to forgive and move past this fact that Lewis made a mistake. Lewis also has this story, and Lewis's story is, when that happened, I believe it was a spouse or a girlfriend, fiance, also left him because she couldn't deal with the fact that he was an alcoholic, that he'd killed this person, that he'd taken a life of someone that was cared for so deeply. So she leaves, and his life comes crashing. He loses his job. He's working at a coffee shop in season three. Obviously, somebody like this is going to have a hard time really finding a job to employ them. Now we're getting better, I think, as a society, giving people second chances. But at the end of season two, Jimmy finally gets to a point where, and I think there's still more coming. There's still more coming from their relationship. I don't think he's 100% past it. Obviously, I don't think he'll ever get 100% past it, but he's past enough to where he realizes that if his daughter Alice, who's a 16-year-old at that point, can forgive somebody who's made a terrible mistake, taking the keys while drinking, and didn't really have a past in drinking a whole lot and driving, makes one mistake, and that mistake also alters their life forever. And although it's so connected to the fact that had he not been drinking and not gotten behind that wheel, maybe Tia's still alive. We may never know that, but that's the idea. And Jimmy's really struggling to get past the fact that this guy just made a careless decision and took the one person he loves the most. But finally, at the end of season two, Jimmy starts to forgive, and he's the one that actually pretty much saves Lewis's life and says, "Hey, this doesn't have to end this way, and we all have our different stories." And he does a really good job. Jason's great in these kinds of situations when he's acting. He really makes it feel that Jimmy is forgiving, and while he is not 100% on board with the fact that he's going to be best friends with this person, um, he's willing to have a relationship and willing to discuss things with him. I think it's interesting because they use the profession that Jimmy, like Gabby and Paul have as therapists. They really lean into the fact that like they can use that to build relationships, not just friendships. And it really allows for the show to open up because Jimmy's able to give advice, Gabby's able to give advice, and Paul's able to give advice because of what their expertise is in and understanding human connection and relationships. And it just continues to build. But in season two, Jimmy saves Lewis's life. He doesn't want to commit suicide. He basically gives Lewis the past that he's looking for of, I forgive you for that mistake that you made. Let's see what we can do to build on to what this relationship is. And let me see if I can help you past the troubles because I'm working through them. You're working through them. Let's maybe not a friendship, but let's work past this, a working relationship on how do we cope with this. And it almost feels that Jimmy has taken on the role of being his therapist, to be honest with you, because they meet later on in season three, or sorry, in episode one of season three. And it's much more client based where he's taken Lewis to these benches and it's always cool because Paul and Jimmy take people to benches to talk to them. All the big moments really tend to happen on benches in this show, which is really cool. It's kind of that play off of like you always sit on the couch. Now we're sitting on benches in parks having discussions and deep, meaningful conversations. But Jimmy's able to move past it, and I think Lewis is going to be helped through it based off of what Jimmy has said to end season two. Now we get into season three, and we pick up with Paul. He is in the bathroom trying to brush his teeth, and you can start to see the tremors big time from his fight with Parkinson's disease. And Parkinson's disease is such a horrible, horrible disease that really just takes over the body and the mind. I didn't know. I mean, I knew that it was a lot of there's a lot of issues that are caused in the mind, which makes you have the shakes and different things like that. I didn't know hallucinations were part. I mean, I think we're learning and getting educated more on what Parkinson's is, and in every disease, I think more and more comes out every single day. And uh, but I didn't know that it really impacted like people have visions and hallucinations. People tend to lose where they are and focus and the blurred vision and all sorts of different things. Like it's a lot in the mind. And I didn't really know it was like that. You think of Alzheimer's or schizophrenia or something like that, where it's really impacting the brain, but you don't think as much as Parkinson's, but it really is. Parkinson's is just as awful. And it really is something that is at the forefront beginning this season. As Paul's trying to brush his teeth, he can't get the toothpaste on, he's shaking, and he has this really cute moment where he is talking to his girlfriend, Dr. Julie Barham, as she's getting into the shower, and it's a cute moment of like he's still turned on by her, as he's saying, wipe off the shower so I can see into the shower kind of thing. And it's cool to see people this age. I think in the show they're probably playing as 70-year-olds. I think they said. I know Harrison Ford's, I think he's approaching 90 or is 90 at this point. But then also, you've got Wendy Malick who plays Julie Barham, and that's such a cute relationship. It shows them that you can find love at any age, and this whole episode is built around that. I think a lot of this season is going to be built around what Paul is going through in his fight with Parkinson's, especially with the introduction of a massive actor in season 3. And they're so good at this, and there's so many great relationships that I think all of them probably have from all of their work and time in TV. I mean, when Bill Lawrence is writing a show, he's got so many connections to different people that you're going to get one hell of a cast. And I think if you add Jason Segel in there, Harrison Ford, you've got somebody like Wendy Malick, you've got people who have been around, Krista Miller, Brett Goldstein, Damon Wayans. You're going to have just an incredible crew that you're going to be able to pick from because of their connections with different actors and actresses that they've worked with past projects. And they pull Michael J. Fox as a character that's going to be a mainstay in season 3. And without spoiling anything, Paul is having a conversation with Michael J. Fox's character, Jerry. They go to I'm assuming it's some kind of neurological research center where they're dealing with and trying to understand further the problems in behind what Jerry and what Paul are dealing with Parkinson's. And there's different things now that they do that they do have different prescriptions that they can give to cause the tremors to be less aggressive, and they try to slow down the disease as much as possible. It's not been a cure for Parkinson's, but they have found ways, and Michael J. Fox has really battled this for decades at this point, and he's lived a very successful life. He continues to act, and I love that they've brought him into this season because he's one of my favorite actors. I haven't seen him in something in quite a while, and I will say it's so sad to watch because he is so wonderful as a human being and as an actor. To watch him really seriously struggle with this disease that they're covering in the show, so he's able to speak upon this. And I love that they're having this relationship built right between Paul, Harrison Ford, who's one of the best actors, I think, and then you've got Michael J. Fox, who again is one of the best actors as Jerry. To build this relationship all season is going to be something incredible, and I think it's going to be something that I'll cherish for so very long because I know they're both entering a stage where they're not going to be acting as much as they had in the past. And I think as their careers have gone on, this is more towards the bookend for both of them. And I think as they start to get older, both of them, and Michael J. Fox, how old is Michael J? He doesn't seem like he's that old. I don't think he's probably 60s, maybe 64. Yeah. So he's not as old, obviously. I think he continues acting as long as he's able to, with struggling with Parkinson's. And then Harrison Ford is 83. Both, I think, look great for their age. I think that they're both still incredibly talented. So it's very easy to see them acting until time runs out, which I think for Michael J., hopefully that's for another 20 to 30 years. Hopefully for Harrison, it's another 20 or 30 years. But you start to think about how long they've done this, and you think about how great they are and how revered they are in the industry, and you take this as maybe some of the last projects, as especially for Harrison, that they'll do. Maybe not so much for Michael, but I just take these little. I'm not trying to kill them both off, but I'm just saying that I think that you start to appreciate the time you have left with them because, and I'm recording this right after Catherine O'Hara has recently passed. And that was something that a lot of people didn't see coming. She was 71 years old. We lost a true mother of the millennium generation, like the millennials, and somebody that I watched in Home Alone, but in Schitt's Creek. And I really love Catherine O'Hara. And it's so hard to not think about that with other people. And obviously you don't just gloom and doom, but you just try to appreciate how much time you have left with some of these incredible actors. And Michael J. Fox and Harrison Ford are right up there with people that I want to appreciate for as long as I can, because you just never know. And that's everybody. But with them, I think that they picked quite a duo. I mean, this is a huge blockbuster duo between the two of them. And just the fact that they're able to bounce Parkinson's off of a person that has struggled with Parkinson's for so long, it's a fascinating dynamic and something that I think we're really going to enjoy. But we get the best line, I think, of the episode, and that is the fuck Parkinson's line. I want a shirt that says fuck Parkinson's. I just don't know where I'd wear that. As Michael J. Fox is basically like, yeah, fuck Parkinson's. And he goes, yeah, fuck Parkinson's. And it's just a great moment because it's always good when Harrison drops the big old F bomb because he's got such that gruffy exterior kind of voice, and it's a lot of fun. But then we flash forward to the next episode, or sorry, the next scene, and Jimmy and Paul, some of our best moments happen again on a park bench. They're sitting on a park bench, or at least we thought was a park bench, and they're talking about Parkinson's. And keep doing that. You've got Paul talking about Parkinson's, and he goes, "Yeah, fuck Parkinson's." And Jimmy's like, "I like that, Paul. Like, well, I think we should start saying that. Yeah, fuck Parkinson's." And Jimmy goes, "Fuck Parkinson's in the face." And then my favorite part of this scene is when Paul answers to that, and he goes, "Jimmy, don't fuck my disease in the face." And Jimmy's like, "Oh, sorry, Paul. Like, I didn't mean to do that." But he's just talking about and reflecting on the fact that like this is a horrible disease. And as time has gone on and time continues to go on and life continues to go on, he's really, you can tell Paul's trying to, who is a very, very tough person and has that, I think you would think of him as something or somebody that nothing really bothers them. But he's always allowed Jimmy to kind of look inside of him and really see a different side where Paul is kind of that soft teddy bear. But he doesn't ever want to give that, right? He does, like whenever Jimmy's around other people and Paul always, he's acting tough. But in reality, he's really not as tough as I think. I got to plug my mic, and I didn't realize I had the wrong mic in. But hopefully it's better here. So you have this moment where Jimmy is really getting on a personal level with Paul, and they're talking about the fact that they need to move forward in life, but that can be very hard when you're dealing with something so difficult. And they're very grateful for having a relationship, and you do get to a moment where he goes, Jimmy's like, your life isn't over. We're going to continue battling. And Harris, or sorry, I'm going to keep doing that. Paul keeps talking about the fact that he knows that he needs to take this and really hit it head on, but it's going to be so hard because now he's starting to get really reflective on life and what life is right now and what it had been in the past. And, how appreciative he is of Jimmy and his relationship. Um, and then he does the thing that I think maybe some other people might do who are battling a disease or a cancer, where they it pans out and they're not actually at a park bench. They're at a bench sitting outside of what appears to be some kind of racetrack, and it's a Porsche racetrack. So sponsorship Porsche. And he goes, you don't have to do this. We don't have to race this car around the track. And Paul's like, yes, no, we have to do this. And you can just tell Jimmy's like, are you kidding me? And then they get into this Porsche and they're driving around the track. And then before it plays the intro, it shows them kind of peeling out and drifting a little bit, going around one of the corners at 100 miles per hour and doing a drift. And Jimmy yells from the passenger seat, "Paul, my wife died in a car accident." And he's like, "I don't care." And he's just like flooring it. And there's this, I think then 70-year-old man driving the car around the track at highest speeds possible, not giving a crap. And it just shows you that oftentimes when you're dealing with something like that is life threatening, that is going to hinder your life, that's going to challenge you, and try to do everything in its power to take anything that you like in life and make it awful, when I'm talking about the disease. And a lot of people rise above that by saying, I'm not going to let this disease hold me back. And that's a perfect analogy there, where and it shows you him driving around in that car. And I think it's a great middle finger to Parkinson. So fuck Parkinson's. Moving into the next scene, you get Gabby, who is bringing coffee to Damon Wayans' character, who is Derek number two, because we have Derek number one, who is the neighbor to Jimmy. Derek number two is told that they don't have creamer, right? Gabby's like, I don't have creamer. And this is a perfect way to describe having creamer for coffee in your fridge at all times. And I think as part of or being an adult now, I totally get this. This totally hit home for me. But she says, I don't have creamer because, well, I didn't feel like getting any, which I felt was so. Now we've got delivery services, so it's easier to just order it and then have it right here. But there's so many times where you're just like, I don't want to go to the grocery and just grab that. Like that doesn't sound fun. And you're like, dang it, why don't I have that? Well, I was too lazy to go get it. I thought it was great, little line that Gabby throws. But they're sitting in the bed, and this is such a great relationship. I love Damon Wayans Jr. In this show. I think he does a phenomenal job, and they have this moment where Gabby's like, "I love you," and Derek number two goes, "I love you," in a really weird voice, and she goes, "Whoa, why'd you do it like that?" Uh, and he goes, "What? What did I do?" And like he doesn't quite realize that when he says that he's almost trying to sound more gruff and manly, like "I love you." And she goes, "No, you don't have to do it that way. You can be like, I love you." And then he goes, "Love you." And she goes, "Better." So a cute moment between Gabby and Derek, who are quickly becoming one of the best couples on this show. And then we get the best couple on the show, in my opinion. You get Derek and Liz, not for the fact that she was cheating on him, but the fact that they are just so great together. Ted McGinley is so great as Derek, and they have a really cool episode, or a really cool scene here where they are walking down the sidewalk. They see racist Pam, who's in the neighborhood, one of the neighbors, and they see racist Pam, who I think racist Pam. It became evident she was racist when you have Sean, who was living with Jimmy and Alice in their pool house, who's the African American man that Jimmy is therapist to in the first season. He's living in the backyard, and when she sees him, she's kind of like really skeptical of who he is, and like it's because of the color of his skin, and you can tell she's racist. And there's one uh thing in season one, I think it is, when she says, which is still one of the best lines in the whole show, is when uh you've got Liz and I think Sean's out there, and I believe Derek are out there around their car. I think they're unloading groceries or something, and she sees she sees Sean, racist Pam does, and Pam says something, and Derek goes, "Suck a dick, Pam," and as he's driving away, and it's one of my favorite scenes. And then you fast forward to season three, episode one. They're walking down the sidewalk. The first time we see Derek and Liz in this episode, and in this season, and they're walking down the sidewalk, and they're like, "Oh, there's racist Pam again." And she goes, "You're gonna do something, do something else. You got to like I've shown that I don't like her because she's racist. You got to do something else to show her that you don't like that she's racist. So you got to come up with something different." He goes, "I don't know how many more times I can tell her to suck a dick." And they get up to her, and you can tell he's trying to figure out what he wants to do to really show his disapproval for her. And he gets up to her, and she's like, and she says something to them. They go, and Liz is kind of like, "Yeah." And she says, "Hey guys," and Derek turns and goes and throws a thumb down, and sticks out his tongue and makes the tongue noise, the little raspberry tongue noise. And it's one of the best parts. And then Liz turns in and goes, "You really turned me on. You got time for a quickie?" And he'll start running back towards the house because he's like, "Sure, why not?" I love Derek, and any scenes we get with him, and we get quite a few coming up that I felt were excellent. So then we get into another great couple on this show, and this is Michael Urie's character, who is Brian. And then you've got his husband, Devin Kawaki, I think Kawaka, I think is how you say his last name, who plays Charlie. So you got Charlie and Brian, who are building a crib for soon to be baby. They do have a surrogate mother who is carrying their child, and we'll see her in the episode coming up. Another great couple of lines here. You've got them building a crib, and then Brian gets up and he stands to go talk as he's talking to Charlie, and Charlie's reading the instruction manual, and Brian is basically his question on, like, are you doing this right? And Brian goes, "Yeah, done. Look at me building shit. So mask, is that turning you on?" And then you've got Charlie's best line where he says, "Yeah, oh yeah, it's really turning me on." And then you get a wonderful comeback from Brian, who says that it was just like a masculine straight man who there's nothing more masculine than confidently doing something wrong and then standing by it as if you're doing something right. And it was so perfect explaining a straight man, a straight male of like, we will just do something so head on and it will be so wrong and we'll claim that we're doing it right and we will take that to the grave with us, even though we know it's probably not. So a great line there. Sean sees his dad, and they have this moment outside of Sean's food truck, which seems to be doing extremely well. That Sean is dating an older man, or sorry, an older man, an older woman. And she goes, "How much older?" And he says, like 40. So a lot older. And then we kind of break away from there. Sean's like, "Yeah, I didn't need the chops busted, and I'm glad that, or I was happy when we weren't talking," kind of thing, to his father, who had not talked to him in years. So another great introduction for a character we hadn't seen since last season. And then we get a breakaway to Jimmy and Alice. Alice is got a freshly cut, fresh do, I guess you would say, got her hair cut. And she's talking about the fact that Wesleyan, a college on the East Coast, is coming to see her at her soccer game coming up soon. Jimmy's looking for his boxer briefs that basically doesn't have any clean boxers, and I think it's an allusion to the fact that like he's still struggling with some things, so he's not caught up on his laundry. He's still behind, and he's dealing with everybody else's problems, dealing with everything else in life, and he's not confronted some of the stuff that he's still struggling with. And then the next scene is he and Lewis talking on the bench, our drunk driver, who he now seems to be his therapist. I think that's what they're setting up, is that Lewis is using Jimmy's expertise to talk him through what he's been dealing with in his whole life, not just the drunk driving incident. Jimmy says, "Are you really happy? Like, are you happy working at a coffee shop, heating up the milk?" And then you've got a great line from Brett's character, Lewis, and he says, "Yeah, but I've got all creative control over how the muffins are aligned." So, not to be mean to the baristas or whatever, I guess you would call them, the muffin artist in this coffee shop, but you can tell Lewis doesn't see it as something lowly that he's doing. He's just doing what he needs to do in order to survive and live. And Jimmy's like, I don't think you're really moving past this. Like I think that here's all this time that has passed, and I don't think it feels about like 5 to 6 months have passed since we last saw them. And he's just talking about the fact that he doesn't feel like he's really living the life that he wants to live. That he's having a hard time moving past certain things that have happened. And he talks he talks about, Jimmy goes, "Didn't you have a job before this? Weren't you like a graphic designer?" And Lewis goes, "Yeah, the farmer's market logo, I made that." And Jimmy goes, "Oh yeah, every time I go to the farmer's market, I see the logo." And he goes, "Yeah, that's kind of the point." Which is a wonderful back and forth between these two. Both of them comedic geniuses, I believe, Jason and Brett, who both write and produce and stuff on the show. And he's just saying that I'm finally feeling okay where I am, but I'm not quite there yet. And that seems to be where every single one of our characters are. Um, the only one that I feel has not really gotten that kind of same sentiment into season 3 so far, in just the one episode. I don't feel like Sean really is feeling that same way, but I do feel that everybody else is struggling with something that they're not quite like they're okay with right now, but there's something more to each of them. And it's set up every single character, and we're going to get to that. It sets up every single character as to they're still struggling with something or struggling to move past something, but um, they're not there yet. And so then it gets into another scene where Jimmy's back at the house. He's walking back and forth. He's saying, "Goal, goal, goal," past Alice's room. And Alice is like, "What are you doing?" And then it's so funny because there's a lot of reviews on this start to the season where I saw some of the critics on there on Rotten Tomatoes, which it's done really well on Rotten Tomatoes at 89% on the tomato meter or whatever they call that. So 89 is very strong on the tomato meter, and it's got 27 reviews. And the ones that are kind of tearing it apart, saying that like they've got humor but they're not delivering fully on the jokes. I'm like, no, like I feel like they've really hit every single joke, and I know that they've seen the whole season. Typically the streaming platforms will send them the whole season when they're doing critical reviews, and critics are reviewing things on Rotten Tomatoes and other platforms. Like they've seen this whole season, so maybe they're talking about other jokes. But like season one, or sorry, episode one was so strong in delivering the jokes and the punchlines that I don't really get where that criticism's coming from. And the reason why I say this is because when Jimmy's in the room, he goes, "You know what? Your mom," because again, Alice has a new haircut, and she goes, "I don't know how to put this up for my game. Like, do I wear a headband or do I wear what do I wear?" And Jimmy goes, "Your mom, when I first met her, had her used to wear her hair just like that." And I was like, "Oh, really?" And he's like, "No, I don't know why I said that." It's just a great Jason Segel line. Like he is so good at where he makes something up to really kind of hit home and hit the emotions. He does it in How I Met Your Mother as well. I think it's just the way that he acts and the way that he delivers, and I know he writes some for himself and he improvises, but he does such a good job of delivering those lines. And then they're like, "Oh, really?" And he goes, "No, I was just making that up to make you feel better." Like I don't know why I said that. So he gets very ahead of himself and then he kind of backtracks, which is really funny. But again, like I said, this is just becoming more and more about the characters trying to move on and get past whatever they're dealing with. And right now, Alice is really dealing with the fact that Wesleyan's on the west or in the East Coast, West Coast. They're on the West Coast, and that's a really long move. I don't know if I'm quite ready for that, but she's also nervous. She wants to perform well. She wants to get the scholarship to Wesleyan because she really enjoys the sport. And that's when you get Jimmy leaves the room to go talk to, because he's like, can we paint our faces? And she's like, no. Like Al's like, the scouts coming. Like, don't paint your faces. It's gonna be so embarrassing. Which I totally get as a teenager. Like, I'm trying to go to this college. College coaches are there, and my parents are acting a fool, or my friends are acting a fool in the stands, and they're not going to want me because they're going to think that baggage comes with me. So she's very nervous about the way they're acting. Jimmy goes out on their big port, and it's so cool how they set this up, very Home Improvement esque, where two neighbors are talking to one another. Except this time they use a very California element where they've got rooftop uh, or deck areas where they go out and talk to each other across the backyards. And Liz and Derek are on the balcony over on their side. And then Jimmy comes out and he's like, "Sorry, no face painting." Derek's like, "What? Are you kidding me? He's already painted red and yellow." It's like hours before the game, and Jimmy's like, "Why is he already painted all up?" And she goes, "He says that he needs time for the paint to settle." Basically breaking the news that you can't have your face painted because it's going to embarrass Alice. And so he goes to wash it off. And Liz is like, they continue having a conversation about Alice, and Alice is like, "All right, come on, I'm ready, gotta go." So they both go down. Liz and Jimmy go down to the car to see Alice off to go to her game. And Alice talks about the fact that she's nervous, and Liz is just reassuring her, like, "Hey, you got this. The Wesleyan coach loves you." She's trying to throw some positive affirmations out there. Like, you're going to get there. You're going to be able to go to New England, and we're going to come visit you in New England. And then Liz goes, "My turtleneck game is fired," alluding to the fact that it's colder over there. So she can't wait to go see her in the big games. She says, season opener, homecoming, neighbors weekend. And Jimmy goes, "That's not a thing." And she goes, "Let me have this." Like, parents weekend is the thing. Yes. Like I'm basically this kid's the step-in mother now that Tia is no longer around. And it's just so good. And you could just tell, like, Liz has this positive energy and Jimmy has a really positive energy all the time. And they're both trying to just be so positive and trying to get Alice to think of other things than the fact that she's nervous. And it works. Like it really works. And Jimmy shows them that, or shows Alice what he's going to do. He does like that, ooh, and he gives them power, and gives her power of affirmations. He goes, "I'm going to do that on the bleachers to give you so much positivity that you're going to be successful." And she's like, "But what if I'm not successful?" Um, but you can see as she's pulling away, she kind of gives a smile. She's still a little nervous, but I think it has helped her get over that. Next scene is Sean, and he and his fling, I guess, which is Dr. Sykes, who is, I believe, if I can remember, one of the psychiatrists that he, or therapists that he had seen, or one of the doctors that he'd seen. And they have hooked up. She's like 40 some years old. Obviously, I think he's 20, like young in his 20s, mid 20s, maybe upper 20s. But he's like, "Yeah, like this is part of life, right? That I'm hooking up with this older woman, and I don't know if there's some issues there or like why necessarily he's drawn to that. I think they'll probably talk about this a little bit more, his relationship with her. But and they do talk about it a little bit right after the scene because he goes and then sees Paul, who is his therapist now, his current therapist. So he goes to talk to Paul, and uh, they are discussing the fact that like she breaks up with him because she goes, "You're a younger man. I need more in life. Let's break up." And you got Sean like, "Why did you break up with me?" And he goes in to see Paul, and Paul's just like, I think it's part of life, and you're clearly going through different things, and you need to be moving on. And again, another allusion to a theme I think that is across the board. So I guess we do get some mention of Sean. Like I said before, it seemed like every character was setting up that they're having to go through and get over something. I think maybe Sean's might be his relationship with his father, something with his father, or his past with his parents. I think there's still something there, but we don't really get that curtain pulled back too much because throughout the episode, Sean is more of like the Jiminy Cricket to everybody, where he's giving you a lot of truth and a lot of evidence based fact and ideas based off of what he's experiencing with the other characters. But he's like, I really got to move out. And then you get a little bit of Sean talking to Paul, and Paul's trying to tell him that, he's fine and that he's dealing with things. And I don't think Sean's quite bought into that. But again, um, Sean's, I think, going to get more and more based off of what this conversation was between he and Paul. And I'm not sure that Sean's quite ready to admit to what he's currently struggling with. So, um, another really good scene between, and I love these scenes between Paul and Sean because they're very rough and tough on the exterior, and don't let a whole lot in. You then get Gabby with one of her patients, and this is just building up the fact that like Gabby's not really fulfilled anymore by some of the cases and some of the patients that she's seeing. She's just going, she says she feels like she's going through the motions, that she's bored. And then Jimmy comes in, and they're in this little break room that they have. Jimmy comes in and goes, "Yeah, I'm dealing with this patient. He's so boring." And then that patient walks in and goes, "Hey, I'm early. Do you have a second?" And then Jimmy's basically like, "Oh shit." So he walks off. And then Gabby goes, "Well, it could be worse. I could be as stupid as he is." Just where he says stupid things, to really just tear himself down. But she's tired of this low stake kind of patient pool, and she wants more. And Paul talks to the fact that like, you know, there are other opportunities for you in other places. I don't think he was telling her to like move on, but I think he was saying, "Don't let us limit what you want to do." And I love that because he's the boss, Paul's the boss. But he's saying, you got places where you can deal with suicidal ideation, you got personality disorders and all sorts of things like that. Um, I think he's saying the fact that like, yes, there's always higher stakes, and Gabby's a little bit like hesitant, but then also like, "Why are you telling me this?" And then Paul goes, "Well, you'd be great in those kind of situations." I hated it because I wasn't good in those situations. Gabby's like, "Well, thank you." Like, I think that's the first time we really seen Paul appreciate what Gabby does. And Gabby is more than capable, I think, of handling high stakes kind of things, because she has in the past. And you get into these ruts, I think, in work, and you get bored with what you're doing. And it's kind of that the slow and mundane. But I feel that Gabby is starting to kind of venture into other things. I think that's alluding to something that's going to happen later on in the season where maybe she takes on somebody else with higher stakes or something that's going on that is going to be a lot deeper in what we currently have with her. So I think it's foreshadowing what's going on. Um, Next scene is going to be, I have it over here on my iPad, so I keep trying to play it back. But then you got Liz sitting in the kitchen, and she is talking to Brian, and they're talking about decorating the nursery for their child that they're getting ready to adopt. And Derek walks in because she's like, "Well, I like two of the patterns." And he goes, "Nope, tell the truth." And she goes, "Well, I like one pattern and the other one I don't really like as much." He goes, "Nope, you're lying again. Tell the truth." And she goes, "I don't really like any of them. And I don't, and honestly, I think I should be the one deciding what's going on with your child and how we're decorating." It was a really good point. And Liz is like, "Well, Also, the most important person is not in the room, and we got to wait till they get here. And that's when Brian goes, "Oh, so you mean my husband, Charlie?" And she goes, "No, not your husband." And then Gabby walks in, and it's like Gabby's like the queen of decorating and an opinion that Liz really appreciates and accepts because she's not willing to accept the other two's opinion. And that's when you get Gabby and Liz basically like we're making all the decisions, and it's just a funny way to show that Liz is very headstrong in what she thinks and what she's deciding, and that it's what she wants. And in that moment, though, we get a phone call, and Derek says, "I'm going to take this phone call outside." This is when the conversation starts to happen that maybe Derek is now having an affair after Liz's slight affair there, where she was kissing on and up on somebody and did cheat on Derek. And that's when you get Brian and Gabby saying, "Oh yeah, it's just the 1 year window. Like it's the 1 year thing. Like that's a rule in cheating is when somebody cheats on someone, the other person in that relationship has a year to cheat on them to get kind of that revenge." And they're like, "What?" Or Liz is like, "What? That's not a thing." And Gabby goes, "No, it's a thing." And then he's like, "Well, Brian's starting to explain, like, yeah, like that's how it is. Like, and he's not gonna, his consequences aren't gonna be that big because you did the same thing to him. You hurt him. It's not his fault." And then Jimmy comes in and he's, he's piping up ready to go because they're getting ready to go to Alice's game. And he's like, "What's wrong with her?" Talking about Liz. And then she goes, "Oh, she thinks," or Gabby goes, "I think she thinks Derek is cheating on her." And Jimmy goes, "Oh, the 1 year rule." And Liz is like, "Wait, what? That's not a thing." And he goes, "No, it happens. That's a thing. It's totally a thing in real world." So now Liz is freaked out that Derek is cheating on her, and now Liz kind of feels helpless, much like Derek probably did when he found out that she was cheating on him. She's not excited, obviously. Derek's pumped. He goes flying by the window, and then they head over to Alice's game. Alice's game goes really well. She's got a moment where she passes the ball. The girl misses. I think one of my favorite moments there is the whole crew is all the cast and crew is there pretty much rooting her on. You got Paul and his wife, or not wife, sorry, I'm gonna ruin things. Paul and Julie, spoiler alert, Paul and Julie are there. You got Derek, Liz are there. Brian and Charlie, Sean, Gabby, and Jimmy are also. You've got her friend. Sorry, Alice's friend is there as well, who makes a funny little joke that she said the coach feels like she is better off sitting on the bench rooting on the team. And then you get a great moment from Brian leaning forward, going, "Hey, my coach used to tell me that all the time too." Basically saying, as a gay man, I didn't like sports, and my coaches used to tell me I was much better on the sideline, like off the field, because I was no good at sports. You just get it was a cool moment, a very cute moment from Ryan. And then, uh, yeah, throughout the whole game, Alice is playing okay. And then she actually gets a free kick, which she scores a goal and is really pumped. But she scores it because you get the whole family, I guess you could call them, whole friend group, cheering her on, and they give her that power that Jimmy said basically that he was going to give her when she was leaving for the game back at the house. And Jimmy's like, "Look over, and we'll give you all those positive feelings and reinforcements." And he stands up, and they're all doing this like, "Ooh!" They sound like Chewbacca, and they're all doing like the hand thing, and Harrison Ford's even doing it. And it was so good. But she scores because she kind of smiles like, "I love these people," and it eased her into the game and calmed her down, and she was able to score. Has a hell of a game. And as she's walking off, the Wesleyan coach comes over and is like, "Hey, Alice, can you got a sec?" And she's like, "Yeah, sure." And as she's starting to walk away, Jimmy's like, "Hey, just be yourself, be calm, whatever she wants to say, just listen." And then he goes, "I'm not going to be that parent that's going to go over there and talk to her." And Alice is like, "Thank you for that." But then Paul pipes up and goes, "No, not the way I'm rolling." He goes, "I've got my eyes on you." And he does like the two fingers to the eyes, and then points at the college coach. And college coach is like, "What the heck? Like what?" He goes, "I'm watching you." Basically, like, don't hurt my adopted granddaughter, I guess you would call her at this point, which is just a fantastic moment. I think once again the writing here and just the positivity and the real feel of like what people would be like that really love you and that really care about you. As they're walking off, you've got Brian talking to Julie and Paul, saying the fact that like you got to do all these things, fill out all this paperwork for the will in case something were to happen to Paul. Julie could get all her stuff, but there's so much paperwork and legality to it because they're not married, because they're partners. It's a lot more of the tape around the um, logistical tape around what is truly going to happen should Paul die and Julie have to take care of something. She's going to have to go through a lot more of the logistics because they're not married, or they don't just get it in the will because of marriage. And that's when Jimmy's like, "Why don't you two just get married?" And Julie's like, they're kind of like, "What? No, that's crazy." And then Julie and Brian walk away, and Paul and Jimmy are left talking on the sidewalk. And Paul goes, "Hey, idiot, thanks for proposing to my girlfriend for me." And Jimmy's like, "What? I didn't mean to do that. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to overstep there." And he's kind of like, "Oops." Uh, just because Paul's very intimidating, and his boss, one, but very intimidating. And Jimmy's like, "No, you know what? I'm going to stand up for myself." And then Brian comes back and goes, "No, no, no. Let's just watch Paul be very angry about this." And then Jimmy goes, "My bad, dude." And then because Brian had said something about let's just watch this unravel, he kind of looks at Paul's angry at Brian as well. And Brian goes, "My bad." But again, they put this out there, and then obviously this becomes the running thing throughout the episode is the fact that maybe they should get married. The next scene is then Derek talking to Liz back at their house. She kind of confronts him about like, "What are you doing? Like, why are you taking these phone calls in private? It's weird. You've taken a couple of these phone calls in the last couple of days and being in private." And she she then accuses Derek of having an affair with his cornhole buddy. And he's like, "No, I would never have an affair on you, or with somebody else on you." And she goes, "Listen, cornhole Sharon, like that, you needed to stay away from her. You know too much about her." Because Sharon is asexual, as Derek claims. And she goes, "You spend way too much talking to her if you know that she is asexual." But then he finally becomes aware of why he's getting the second degree, and he says, "I'm not having an affair." Matthew, their son, called and said that he'd been let go from his job. Last couple of days have been trying to figure out the living situation. And she goes, and he's like, he didn't want his son coming to talk to her about what's going on. And she's like, "I totally get that, but why aren't you up front with me?" And he goes, "Well, to be honest, you probably have been very upset with the fact that he's moving back in." And she goes, "When is he moving back in?" And he goes, "Well, about six hours ago." So he's already there. And the kids moved back in, and he'd lived there, I think, in season 2. So he's back, moved in, and this is Alice's, I believe, boyfriend still. And here he is. He's in their house, and she's like, "You know what? Fine, whatever." She eases up, gives him a hug, and they kind of move on. So that's another setting up some other things in the season. I think some foreshadowing there. Um, See, is there anything else in this next scene? The next scene is when Jimmy is talking to Paul with Gabby inside of the break room, and they're talking about just the punishment. Oh, this is when they're talking about the fact that Jimmy had basically proposed to Paul's then girlfriend Julie, and he's like, "You know what? Fine, whatever." He forgives them, fine, or forgives Jimmy finally. But it's because Gabby starts to say different things about weddings and having an actual wedding for Julie and Paul, and that she wants to be the wedding planner. So she calls up Julie, and Julie is like, "You know what? I don't know if I really want a wedding in this big ordeal." And she goes, "It doesn't have to be huge. Like, we'll just have a couple things at the house, and we can do it there, and we don't have to get too dressed up." And they finally agree that they'll have a wedding, but Paul is not happy about that. Paul doesn't want a wedding. He doesn't want something over the top. So he's now pissed at Gabby, and Jimmy's off the hook. We go back to Jimmy's house, and there's Alice and Sean. Sean is creating a cheese plate for the Wesleyan coach because the Wesleyan coach is making a stop at the house to recruit Alice further to give her an offer. And uh, Alice, you get this idea where Alice is still very nervous, doesn't really know how to handle it. Jimmy's trying to coach her on how to handle a house visit. And Sean comes in, the boyfriend, and Jimmy's just like, "Why? What is he doing here? Why is he here? He's eating all my food. He's coming in because he comes in and starts eating all the cheese plates and everything that was prepared for the Wesleyan coach." And he goes outside. Liz is out of the balcony. He goes, "What are you doing? Why are you sending your kid over here to eat all my food?" And she goes, "I fed your kid for a whole year while you were grieving your dead wife." And Jimmy's like, "Fair." So he goes back in. He allows it, but Jimmy goes through this whole spiel of how to talk to the coach, and his best advice is like, if it gets worse to worse comes to worse, just tell the Wesleyan coach that your wife or your mom's died, and then that'll get you the offer that you want, and that'll break the ice. And it's really funny because Jimmy then starts to freak out himself, and he's like, "Are my pits sweating?" And then Alice is freaking out. They're doing the same kind of thing, father daughter, very similar. They're panicking on like what to do. So Jimmy's like, "Here, fine, I'll give you some talking points. Did you know Pele was the first spokesperson for Viagra?" And she goes, "Ew, gross. I don't need that. I don't need that advice." And he's like, "Fine, fine. When you shake her hand, make sure it's not too firm. They don't like it too firm. It's kind of weird." And then he goes, "No matter what, um, what the Wesleyan coach picks from that fucking cheese plate, you say that it's a great choice. Just be yourself. You know what to do." So he's giving her all this really funny, random advice, bad advice, and then it pans over, it shows Sean standing in the door with the Wesleyan coach, and they go, "Hey, she's here." He goes over and he goes, "Firm, not too firm." So he starts to do the thing he's told Alice not to do. Um, he says, "Nice choice," and she goes, "What are you talking about?" Like she hadn't got anything from the from the cheese plate. And then the best part of the whole interaction, Jimmy under pressure just goes, "You know what? I'm not her biological father. Actually, her mom had an affair with David Beckham, and that's basically a love child of David Beckham's." It's so good. And I was dying laughing because David Beckham's one of the best soccer players in the world and in the history of the game. So Jimmy just completely cracks under pressure and has a moment. We then get a scene with uh, Charlie and Brian, and they're talking to the surrogate mother, and they're trying to figure out the best way to break to her that they don't really obviously want her around as a mother figure, um, and they want to set boundaries on visitation, and they're not sure if they want her to visit the baby because obviously she's still the mother, she's carrying the child, she's going to have feelings towards the child. Postpartum is definitely a real thing, um, but uh, they can tell that she's definitely feeling emotional and connected to this kid that she's having for Charlie and Brian. And um, yeah, you leave thinking like, yeah, she's gonna want to be in this baby's life, and they're not quite sure how to do that. And so Brian then goes to Gabby, Liz, and Jimmy, who are over at Liz's house, and he's talking about it. And she's because the mother wants like a Winnie the Pooh mural painted on the wall at Brian's house, and it opens up, and Liz goes, "Winnie the Pooh can suck my dick." Like, it is so good. Basically, Liz is like not having it. She wants to be the interior designer. She wants to make the decisions on the baby. Like she's invested in this child, and she's like, "This is just the mother. Like this is just the person having the baby. She won't even be in this kid's life." And Brian's like, "Yeah, we don't really know how to tell her. What do we tell her?" They get another lawyer involved eventually in the episode, and the lawyer is just basically like, "You guys get to decide. Like, you're going to be the fathers legally in your rights. You're going to have the ability to tell her that she has some limitation, no limitation, whatever you want it, or sorry, limitations on visitation, whatever you want it to be. You get to decide on how much this person gets to see this baby." And you can tell that Charlie and Brian are like leaning toward, we don't really want this person around at all. Which is totally in their right as somebody adopting the child. And I think it's very tough because this person that is having the child is surrogate mother. Um, who I don't. I'm trying to think. Is she surrogate? Either way, they are going to adopt her child. I don't remember if it's her biological or surrogate. I think it might actually be biological. At this, I'll have to look that up for next episode. But either way, this woman is giving up her child to Charlie and Brian, and she wants to be in their life, it seems. Yeah. And Brian and Charlie are like, I want to start our own life, our own traditions, our own family without you because it's going to get muddied. And at one point when they're talking to this lawyer about the fact that like they don't know how much they really want the birth mother in this child's life, yeah, Charlie goes, he's like, "Yeah, I don't know if we really want her around making random visits once a year or twice a year." And then Brian goes, "Yeah, we don't want her to be like Santa Claus." where she just comes in and has this magical power over this child. And it was a good line. It was a really well written there and a good joke, really delivered. And but it really did. It gave quite a serious topic a little bit of light. And I think it's something that is often discussed when you're adopting a child too, when you have the birth mother or a surrogate where they might get attached to the child because they birthed the child, and they do take on that nurturing motherly all there, the hormones and everything else that go into loving that child. It's hard to disconnect, and then PTS or sorry, postpartum will happen, and um, it is going to be very hard for that person to disconnect from the child, and I think that's what they're really worried about as the kids' fathers. So we have a really good moment there. But before that, we have a conversation happening between Gabby, who is now the wedding planner for Julie and Paul's wedding, and she's talking about the fact that like this doesn't have to be over the top. It's going to be the best wedding ever. I'm basically J Lo from the wedding planner, and then they call her G Lo, which is a really cute joke there. And she's like, you know what? Let's do it. Let's plan a motherfucking wedding. And they're like, all right. And Paul's not buying it. Paul's like, I don't want to do all this stuff. And Paul's like, I love that movie, but I don't want to be involved in any of this wedding planning. And everybody's like, you watch the wedding planner? Like, that's such a weird thing. But yes, so Gabby starts to give different roles, different people. And the best one is they give Jimmy, basically, he's going to officiate the wedding and he goes berserk. He's going nuts because he's like, hell yes, I've been dreaming about this moment forever. I'm going to make the best speech. And it comes with the fact that like they're like you don't need to have a speech for everything because Jimmy always seems to have a speech for everything. Even before the soccer game, he has this big speech. Like you don't need a speech for everything, dude. Like, but he's the big speech guy. Jimmy's the thinker, the talker, the guy with the big heart, and so he's excited about officiating Paul's wedding because he loves Paul. He's his mentor. It's like a very fatherly figure for Jimmy, and so he's really pumped for that. And you get that Jason Segel moment, which is just so wonderful. And then Gabby's like, "You guys need to go and find some outfits to wear because obviously you've got all the boys. So it's going to be Brian, Jimmy, I think Derek and other Derek are going to be the groomsmen. So they got to go find some outfits for Paul. And then we get the scene with Alice and the Wesleyan coach. And Wesleyan coach is like, we're really looking for a great defender, somebody like you. Really, you're a perfect fit for us. She looks like she's going to give this offer to Alice. Alice, as she's starting to listen, it kind of fades to the background, and you can hear Alice and the music swelling up. And it's definitely after the Wesleyan coach goes, and you have such a, although albeit loyal, very aggressive and crazy kind of following with your family and friends, we still would love to have you kind of thing. And Alice has this moment where you see it in her eyes where she's like, oh yeah, my family. Like if I move away, I won't see them as much anymore. And as the Wesleyan coach is walking out, we get a scene where Sean interacts with the Wesleyan coach and she goes, hey, how'd it go? You know, everything good? And the Wesleyan coach goes, no, she turned down our offer. Like she's not going. And Sean's very confused by this because he's like, she wants to go to Wesleyan. I know how much she wants to go to Wesleyan. She's made a pretty big deal about this. So Sean's confused. He goes back into the house. And then that's when we get that scene with the lawyer that comes in to talk a little bit with when you get with, I think it's the lawyer, but he gets with talk to Charlie and Brian, and they are discussing how much visitation rights the birth mother is going to get, which Liz does not agree with. Liz is like, I don't think that this person deserves any visitation. And you get the sense that Charlie and Brian have decided that like this is our family. We want to do our own thing. We don't want involvement from a birth mother. So no, I don't think we should allow the birth mother to be involved. We then go to a boutique that sells suits, really nice suits, and you get the Derek's talking to Jimmy and Paul, like, hey, we came because we have style. Jimmy doesn't really have style. Sorry, they're not gonna be the groomsmen. They're just brought because they have style. And Jimmy needs an efficient not dress, but suit. And Paul, you need to look good, and we are here because we know how to dress. The Derricks know how to dress, but Jimmy dresses like Mr. Rogers, and, and it shows Jimmy in a sweater like Mr. Rogers. Jimmy goes, "Oh, my aunt slept with Mr. Rogers." Fun fact. It was really good. You get a sex joke in there. I forget exactly what it was, but um, then it shows the Derek's walking away, going to find pocket squares to match the suit that Paul's going to wear during the wedding, and then it shows Paul reaching for a belt and or a bow tie. I can't remember what's hanging up, but when he goes, he's having way too much time or hard of a time grabbing it because of the Parkinson's, and then Jimmy grabs his hand and he tries to help and he goes, "Fuck Parkinson's," and he goes, "Yeah, fuck Parkinson's." Great, great moment. Um, Jimmy's like, you want to look good for your wedding. It's going to be exciting. How excited are you? It's great that you get married again. And he goes, well, Paul's like, yeah, but when you get married again, talking about when he wants to be around for his wedding. And Jimmy's like, I don't think I want to get married again. I found the love of my life. And then you get this great moment where Paul's like, you're not replacing her. Back to what we talked about at the beginning of the episode. You're not replacing her. You're moving on. You're coping just like any other human would be. And every human wants personal connection and love. And there's a long way to go in life for Jimmy. You're 40 something years old. There's a long way to go. You're going to find love again. It might not be right away, but like you need to put yourself out there and love again. And it might not be the same, and it's never going to be the same as having Tia, but like you got to move on. And I think that's such a hard thing. I can't imagine what that's like losing a spouse, thinking, you found the love of your life. You're going to spend the rest of your life together, and then that's taken away so quickly, and so horribly. And it would feel like you're betraying them, but they're no longer around. Like there is no more for them. So you're having to try to decide, do I move on after, what if I get hurt again? What if I do love someone again and then they're taken from, yeah, I think there's so many things that go into that and factoring into that moving on. And Jimmy is not ready for it. We then go to a scene where Alice is talking to her friend on the porch, and that's when she tells her friend, I can't remember the friend's name exactly, but she says that she is not going to Wesleyan because the Wesleyan coach did not offer her, flew all this way and didn't offer her a scholarship. And and then Sean hears that as he's coming around the back of the house, and he says, "What are you talking about? You're lying. She did offer you. I just ran into her outside." And she goes, "Yeah, but I was just practicing so I could lie to my dad." And the friend's like, "Whoa, why'd you lie to me?" And she goes, "I was just practicing so I can tell my dad later that I didn't get an offer for Wesley." And she goes, "I can't leave you guys. I can't leave my friends. I can't leave my family, especially with all that we've been through together. I just can't come to terms with leaving the West Coast for the East Coast. It's such a long way to go, and I just don't want to leave." And Sean's basically like, "You got to do what you got to do. Like, you got to move on." But he goes, "I get it. Fine, whatever. Lie to your dad. Whatever you want to do. Fine." Sean's just trying to be the voice of reason, and he gets shut down very quickly from Alice. Um, it's just again, I think that the way that she's had to deal with her mother passing, it's been so much on her to try to move on and realize that she's already had family taken away. Now she's choosing to take her family away because she's going to go to the East Coast and she won't be around them. And she's, I think, probably afraid too of losing them at some point, and maybe something happens to them, and so she's worried that something might happen if she goes away, and it might be the last time she sees somebody that she's really, um, she really loves and is close with. And they're like, no, just like, you know, we'll see. Like Sean's like, let's just go, like move past it, and she's just like, I don't think I can. Um, then you have another moment where Paul is back in the kitchen after going to the boutiques. He's returned because he didn't want to go to the other boutique because the boutique they were at didn't have the pocket squares. So the other three guys went to go get those pocket squares. Paul returns to Liz's house, and the girls are there. You got Julie, his fiance, I guess at this point, um, in the house, and then you got Gabby and Liz, and they were talking about a bachelorette party. But then they go to kitchen. Paul's there getting a drink of water. The best part is Paul's like, or they're like, "Oh, what are you doing back? Where's the rest of everybody?" And he goes, "Well, Jimmy went on to go with the other guys." And he goes, "They're like, you know their names?" And he's like, "No, I don't know their names," which is even funnier because they're both named Derek. Got Derek 1 and Derek 2. And Paul's like, "I don't know their names." But I started to think, I'm like, did he not remember their names because the parking, like, is the memory? Or was he just messing around? Like, that's what I started to think a second watch through. Like, through the first watch through, I thought he was just being funny. The second time, I'm like, maybe he actually forgot their names. And he knows Derek, Liz's husband, pretty well. Like, that's not just a name you'd forget. I would realize if he'd forget the other Derek's name. But because they're both named Derek, I think that set it up very well. Like, how could you forget their names? So that had me wondering. Um, but uh, Paul's just not bought into this wedding, and Julie seems to be upset because Paul seems to be very hesitant about the wedding, and she wants it. I think she wants that ceremony. She wants that celebration. She really loves Paul, but Paul's just like, I'm not into this. And I think a lot of that's just with his fight with Parkinson's and the fact that like he's just having a hard time really enjoying anything. And um, he just seems very angry. And he's trying to cope with and deal with the fact that he's struggling with his life threatening disease, and he doesn't know how to quite cope. And so he's taking it out on this wedding, and he doesn't want this pomp circumstance. But I also think he thinks that like once he has this wedding, once they move forward, if they continue to move forward and they move forward together, what is a loss to Julie going to mean for him or for her? And he's trying to cope with the fact that like he might die from this and die early from this and leave Julie behind. And he just he wants to blame this all on Julie, but I think he's having a hard time doing so because there's just nothing to blame Julie for. Julie wants to move forward. She's happy with who she's with, and um, I just don't think Paul's too thrilled about that. So there really seems to be a big divide there on how Paul feels. We then get Alice explaining to Jimmy what happened with the Wesleyan coach. She lies and says that she didn't get an offer. She flew all this way and to give an offer. And Sean goes, "Is this ridiculous?" He's like, "I'm done listening to you lie to your dad. She got the offer. She's lying to you. She just doesn't want to leave the family." That's when Jimmy's like, "Alice, you got to go. Like, we'll be fine. We've all got to move on at some point." Which is funny because he's giving this advice when he's not ready to move on himself. Um, I just you really needed this moment because Alice is afraid of leaving, and it just shows that she's not ready also to leave. I think because she's worried about Jimmy. She's worried about the people around her coping with Tia not being there, um, which makes a lot of sense. I think she's very concerned about her family and her friends. We then get another scene with Charlie and Brian, and they're talking to the birth mother. And there's about 45 minutes to the wedding. They have a really good moment of like, "You look great." They're very similar, and she's very complimentive of Ryan and Charlie and saying that they're wonderful, and she's so happy that they're going to be the fathers and that this baby's going into a family that really cares or friends that really care. And she couldn't be more thrilled, and she's so happy, and she can't wait to see where they go in the future. And it couldn't have been any better of a situation. And then you start to see Brian and Charlie start to feel bad, like maybe we should let her into this wild situation of friends and family, because like it's not your typical family. It's neighbors, and it's their therapist boss, and like Charlie and Brian are like, we're just this couple that got thrown into this wild set of friends and family, and we've all become this weird family together. But it's true, like Liz and Derek are like uncles, and like they go through all of the aunt and uncle. And like you got the gunkle situation with Alice and with Brian, because Brian is Jimmy's best friend. And so it's just a really cool dynamic, family dynamic. But he says we're a quirky big little family kind of weird situation where we don't have your typical family structure, but we are all friends and family, and we're welcoming this baby in. And I think that adding another person, the birth mother, wouldn't be necessarily a bad idea. And she needs somebody. She's lonely. She doesn't have anybody. Her parents have kind of disowned her in a way. And Jimmy and or sorry, Charlie and Brian decide, well, maybe this birth mother, this is what she needs. She needs some visitation and connection to a family of sorts. And so maybe she's added into this friend slash family group. So that was fun. They go back, and now they're getting into the fact that there's a wedding, and they're running around the backyard, and they're having this ceremony. And there's this moment right before the ceremony, before Paul heads over to the wedding with Julie, that he hadn't formally proposed. And so he gets down on a knee and proposes and says, "This is what I want most in life is you." And it's such a cute moment. Harrison Ford breaks up in this moment. I don't know if that was a real breakup, but like as far as like he chokes up and really, I mean, it's such a powerful scene between he and Julie, and she goes, "Yes, I'll marry you." And so you get the sense of like maybe he was getting some cold feet on actually being married. But he comes to a conclusion that this is worth celebrating. A love like this is worth celebrating. And I think he's moving past his former relationships as well, and Julie too. And they're moving forward in life and together, and they're going to face this disease together. We head off to the wedding, and the wedding is very ceremonious. You've got Paul's daughter that shows up, and she shows up with a husband, Dave. And freaking lo and behold, we had a Scrubs crossover here. This was such a really cool moment. Neil Flynn is playing Ray, who was the janitor on the show Scrubs. So we get a nice little crossover here. I was really pumped to see that because I was a big Scrubs fan. Because this is a Bill Lawrence show. We get Flynn in there, and Neil is easily one of my favorite actors. He's hilarious, and he's really good also in the show called The Middle. So if you haven't seen that, definitely recommend it. But we get some banter, some flirty banter between Jimmy and Paul's wife, and they're going to dance together because they're just trying to get Jimmy to feel something. Jimmy needs to move the past the idea that you were only meant one true love when that one true love is taken from you. Moving on might be the best thing to do because everybody needs love in this world, and that's a way I think Jimmy's going to be able to feel it. And so they're just trying to get Jimmy past this idea that everybody's kind of stuck in this friend zone. And Paul's daughter kind of gives him that fun little flirty moment, and they go dance. Then, as they are off to go dance, Jimmy runs into his daughter Alice, and Alice has gotten a phone call, or is calling, sorry, the Wesleyan coach, trying to apologize, trying to get that contract, or sorry, the scholarship back, saying that she made a mistake. The Wesleyan coach isn't really buying it, and then finally they go, "Just play with the dead mom card," and she plays the dead mom card. It works. She gets the offer, and then Jimmy and Sean high five. Looks like Alice is headed off to Wesleyan next year for college soccer, which is really exciting. Jimmy gets called over to do the officiating, and you get a marriage of two of some of the strongest characters in this show. And I love this relationship. It shows that you're never too old for love. Even when love leaves you, you're able to move on. And I think it's a direct reflection of like what Jimmy could find. I think it's setting up the idea that like they found love so Jimmy can find love, and that's okay. It's okay to move on and move past losing somebody that you loved as a spouse, and moving on to another person to find that same kind of love. Um, you can tell that Paul and a little bit hesitant still, but they end up stealing the deal. They get married. They jump before he says you can kiss the bride. They start making out. Jimmy obviously making all sorts of funny jokes about the connections that he and Paul have made and all that. But it's just a great moment. Jason is so good at this, where he's uh, I think improvising a lot of what he's saying, but um, it's such a cool moment. And then you get all the characters congratulating um, Paul and Julie. Uh, you get a pan away of all the characters dancing, and they're talking about um, their love for everybody else. They all love each other. You got Brian and Charlie who love each other deeply, and there's a funny moment between Liz and Derek where Liz goes, if you get to kiss somebody, like you fine, I'll go with the rule of 1 year. You're allowed to kiss somebody if you really want. And he's like, anybody, I can kiss anyone. He goes, I'd rather just kiss you. And he kisses Liz. Really great moment there. Derek has seemed to have moved on from the cheating stuff, but it seems Liz is still stuck in that headspace, which I think will be built out more in the season. It then goes over to Brian and Charlie. I think Charlie's the one that says it to Brian. He says, "You can kiss anybody." He goes, "Oh, like Pedro Pascal?" And he goes, "No, no, no, like, of course, yeah, whatever." And then they laugh and they kiss each other and goes, "No, I'd rather just kiss you too." So you get a great moment there between Brian and Charlie. Gabby and you've got Gabby and other Derek talking about how much they love each other, and they say, "I love you," in a very normal way, and it's very, very casual and very good, because I think it shows it's taking that step of like Derek's ready to say "I love you," Gabby's ready to say "I love you," and they're ready to move forward as well. Um, but then again, we have another conversation of like Jimmy, like it's okay to move on. You're okay to move on. You're okay to have fun, and you're not replacing anyone. Um, Great moment to kind of seal the deal, but I think obviously foreshadowing the fact that this is going to be a running theme throughout this season is Jimmy moving on. And I think that's where Kobe Smolder's character is going to come back into this. The last scene, and a scene that was so very powerful. I got goosebumps watching it. Um, Michael J. Fox, Jerry, is sitting at the table at Liz's kitchen, and Paul comes in to get a drink of water out of the sink. He turns around, and there is Jerry sitting at the table. And when I first saw this, it's like, oh, that's cool. Like, I didn't even realize that they had another moment where they talked to each other. Maybe they just call each other or whatever. It was cool. They invited Jerry. Paul must like Jerry. I was like, this. He's just going to be wrapped up into this friend group. He goes, Jerry, what are you doing here? And Jerry, he goes, hey, don't get too excited. I just love cake. Like, don't get too excited. I'm not your friend. You get Julie pop her head into the kitchen and say, hey, stud, who are you talking to? And Paul points over the kitchen table. He goes, obviously, Jerry over there. And she goes, who? And it pans back, and there's nobody sitting at the table. If you go back to the very first conversation, this is why I didn't want to spoil anything. You get a mention from Jerry that you start to see things, you hallucinate, you start to see things that aren't there. He makes a joke about Halle Berry being in his bathtub. Jerry does, and he goes, "Sometimes it's even my mom." And Paul goes, "Ooh, sorry." And he's like, "No, my mom. Supposedly, my dad said that my mom was a fox in the sack." And it was like, "Oh, gross." But there was like a 30-second conversation of like the fact that you start to see things, you hallucinate. Jerry is a character that Paul is seeing through hallucination. He is not a real physical person. Jerry is the inner dialogue, the inner character, kind of like the Parkinson's that he's talking to. Um, the embodiment of this disease is Jerry in his mind, and he is hallucinating, seeing this. Nobody else can see this Jerry character. So we're going to get Michael J. Fox as a voice in his head that only Paul can see. And that is such a fascinating way to go about this. And I love it because it's going to give so much to the show of like what Paul is feeling and how he's dealing with this stuff. And you get real life examples from what Michael J. Fox is going to be able to present in writing to and talking to and acting out what it is like to go through the process of having a disease like Parkinson's. So what a great dynamic this is going to be. This threw me for a complete loop. I was like, "What?" The cool thing that they also set up is the fact that Julie is a doctor and knows very well what patients with Parkinson's go through. She's dealt with it. And so she knows that he is in the phase of now hallucinating, which is a progression of the disease in the mind, which eventually becomes more and more evasive and more difficult to treat and eventually would lead to someone's death. I think it is so good because she doesn't, like some characters be like, "What are you talking about? You're crazy. Like, what are you talking about?" But because she's a doctor, she knows what he's going through, and she knows all this stuff about Parkinson's because she is a doctor. She's able to realize, I just need to be there for him because what he's seeing is true in his mind, and it's this disease that is causing it. So there's not this like ongoing running thing of like, we get four episodes in, and they're like, "I think he's crazy." No, they know he's struggling with Parkinson's, and that is what's causing him to see this character named Jerry, which is such a great thing, I think, to have another doctor there. Now you're going to have it tackled from a different direction as well, from how therapy would deal with somebody with Parkinson's and coping with somebody with a disease. So it's such a great dynamic here that we're going to get. Jerry being Michael J. Fox, I think is fascinating. But overall, what a great episode to start season 3. Episode 1 was a hit. 8.9 right now, I think, on IMDb is what the episode was rated. But again, I think that we are spoiled tremendously to have this cast together. It is such a great cast. I think that adding Michael J. Fox in as a wrinkle is going to be really unique. I think it's going to be quite a dramatic season. I think we're going to get a very dark season. I think we're in for, while there is always going to be humor in this show, there is so much that is going to happen between um, these characters that are real deep feelings of grief and struggling with grief and PTSD and postpartum, I think is going to be discussed here as well. It seems. I think that's what they were setting up with a character like the birth mother that is giving birth to Jimmy and Charlie's, or sorry, to Brian and Charlie's kid. Um, I do. I think we are set up for quite an experience for season three, which again, this show has always done so very well. You get Lewis's character struggling with the fact that he's not ready to move on from what he had done, and but Jimmy was willing to forgive him, but Lewis not able to forgive himself. But you got a lot of that. I think the biggest thing going forward, though, will be definitely Jimmy trying to move past this idea where he just needs to have one love in life and that's it. And if it's taken from you, that's just too bad, which isn't the way I think humans would operate normally. I mean, until maybe you were later in life. But even then, you see Paul and Julie being a perfect example of like it's never too late in life to love someone. You're not replacing the person that was there before, but you're moving on and dealing with those emotions together. And I think the person that you add into life would understand that. If you find somebody you love, they would be willing to understand that you lost a former partner and a former love of your life, knowing that maybe they won't ever fill that void, but they're going to fill a void of just love. That's such a it's such a rough thing to try to wrap your head around if you've never been through it. And it'd be really tough to be that other person. In this case, Kobe Smolder's character, where it appears she is going to be the one that is the love interest of Jimmy throughout the season. So we shall see. I think that's what's coming up in season two, or episode two. I think we're going to get him reconnecting with Kobe's character, which I can't remember off the top of my head what that person's name is, but I think we're going to get that. We'll see. Maybe I've kind of felt like Sean and Alice weren't quite done with their relationship, but they always seem to be together in different ways. Where I don't know if it's like a big brother type of looking out for, or like a romantic feelings type of way that he's looking out for her, but he always seems to have Alice's best interest at hand, and Alice at it can be defecating at times, but self um, inflicting pain upon herself, and I think that he tries to help her through that. I definitely believe that we're getting more of the Sean and his father. There's something still there where he's not quite forgiven his father for what, kind of walking out on him and having that relationship that they have. Um, so yeah, I think we're in for quite a treat over the next couple of episodes. I can't wait to talk about the next episode. We always record these on Sunday, so hopefully they'll be out on Sunday evening, Monday, so you can listen to them before they air in that following week. But thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. If you got this far, I know it was a longer episode, about an hour and a half, but there was a lot to break down in this first episode. I think it'll be a little bit less as the season goes on. I wanted to try to do scene by scene, see how that worked, but I really do think that the characters are set up nicely. I think we're getting into this idea where characters, every single one of them has something that they need to move on from and accept, and then how do we cope with different things that we were grieving over or dealing with, and how do we take that next step in life, which is always what life is about, is taking what's in front of you and making what it is, or making it worth what it is, and moving on and making the decision to either move past it or take what you're currently dealing with, and go day by day on just trying to figure out how to survive, right, and how to live life to the fullest. And that's what everybody's trying to do, I believe. Again, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We really appreciate it. You can find us over on X at the Screen Society Pod cast, if you search that up, or if you type in at Screen So Pod. It's Screen SOCPOD. The username I really wanted was not available. So again, that is at Screen SOS, or sorry, I can't speak, at Screen SOCPOD over on X. We are the Screen Society Podcast Zero over on Instagram, because the Screen Society Podcast was taken. But if you search on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, the Screen Society Podcast, that's where you can find us. It will pop up. And we really look forward to talking more about Shrinking season 3, episode 2. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And we will see you next time.